Hey everyone, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So today we are going to get a chance to chit chat about Sennelier Oil Pastels. I'll go through the list of items that I'll be using so everybody can see that and know that. Uh, but as Annie mentioned, feel free to throw things in the chat. I'm really informal when it comes to this kind of thing. So if you have questions, I can answer them in real time. Uh, Annie will just let me know and we can go from there. I'll make some time for a Q&A at the end. So if there's something you don't want to throw in the middle, just save it up to the end there and we'll talk about it then. Uh, but first, a little bit about me. I am an artist. I have my degree is in art and art history. And I live in Northern California, just north of San Francisco, uh, where I have my studio, my home, and I travel around the country, the US and Canada, as our education manager for Sennelier, for Fabriano, for Watercolour, for a number of different brands that I work with. So I get to talk about all these fantastic brands with a wonderful history. And I want to talk a little bit about that history too before we switch over to my other screen and we can see what I'm doing down on the table here. So the main thing we're going to be talking about today is the Sennelier Oil Pastels. And they have such a fantastic history. The Sennelier Oil Pastels are kind of a modern product for Sennelier. So Sennelier started in 1887 in Paris, France. The Sennelier store was open. And they started making paint for the French Impressionists, for the artists around Paris. And they were making a lot of oil paint, a lot of watercolor paint. So they weren't in the oil pastel business quite yet. And then around the turn of the century, they started making soft pastels around 1901, 1902. And they were working with a lot of the artists of the time, like Degas, to kind of reform their color palette and figure out what was exactly the needs of the artists then. And so we kind of keep going forward and we get into the 1940s. And we're in the second generation of Sennelier. Henri Sennelier is now running the store. He's a chemist. He took after his father, Gustave. And he gets a visit from an artist, Henri Goetz, who is famous in his own right, but also a very good friend of Picasso. And he said, I have this friend, Picasso, who has been painting and drawing and doing these mixed media projects. And he has been using crayons in his paintings. And not all of the collectors are really liking the idea of these crayons. So is there something you can make that's a little bit more like an oil paint that will give us the effect of a crayon? And so after some thought, they came up with the first 50 colors of the Sennelier Oil Pastel, specifically for Picasso. And they were a lot of blues, a lot of grays. We still have that set that Sennelier makes, but we've expanded the range now to 120 colors. So it's more than doubled since the 1940s. And with that, they designed something that could go onto the project, onto the paper, onto the canvas, like an oil paint. So it goes down buttery like a lipstick, but also could be used on glass, on wood, on sculpture, on metal, pretty much on any surface we want. And so now I'll switch to the other camera and we can take a look at some of the stuff we'll be playing with today. All right, so I mentioned that we're using the Sennelier Oil Pastels, and the set we're using today is the landscape set, because lately I've been doing this series of abstracted landscapes. So I'm going to work with what I know, play with a little bit of that. And I am working on Fabriano Artistico paper. I noticed on the list, we also had the Fabriano Studio cold press paper. So I have some of that here as well. That's a fantastic paper. We can talk about those a little bit. And then some of the other things I had on the list are the Sennelier Oil Pastel Fixatif, which we'll talk about towards the end. I had an erasing shield, which we'll talk about as we get going. I had a palette knife. You can use any palette knife. I just wanted to have something that I could scrape, burnish a little bit. And then I have got some color shapers, a couple different shapes and sizes here. I like the number 2 variety of shapes. And with those, I just want to be able to play around with the paint a little bit. So first, we'll open up our set here and we'll have a look inside. So it comes with a great little info sheet, gives us info in a variety of languages on all the different wonderful things that Sennelier makes for the Sennelier Oil Pastels. And then on the other side, a color chart of all those 120 colors. And a lot of those colors are going to match the exact same colors of the paints, the watercolors, the oils, all those things that we may be used to already. And then we've just got a little kind of a lookbook on Sennelier here, goes through some of the history, and then has some really great fun imagery. All right, and then it's nicely encapsulated in foam. You can see I've used this set before. The foam is great. I travel with these a lot. They go in my suitcase. I can check my bag. I can throw it down a flight of stairs. And hanging out in there in that foam, they're just really, really well encapsulated. And then within that set, we have got this wonderful set of 24 colors. Let's see, I think I have all the colors on the screen there if we're looking at the side of it. So the landscape set I like because it's got a lot of neutrals in it. It's got a few greens, a few blues, a few reds, few yellows, a little bit of everything that I want to play with. And then of course the sticks are available individually in the store as well. So if there's other colors that you want to add, you always can. And they come in a larger size as well. But for this and for most purposes, I like to use the smaller size because I can get a little bit of a sharper edge on some of it. One of the other things that I make sure I always have with me is paper towels. You know, if I'm traveling, it might be a handful of napkins that I got at whatever place I was eating last that I stuff into my backpack. So I have those. If I know I'm going to be working for, you know, a good long time, I do sometimes have some rubber gloves that I'll throw on. I am at home today and I am near my sink and my soap, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just use my hands bare. And then occasionally I'll keep a Q-tip around as well. And that's just for a little bit of extra smudging if I want it. And you can even use some solvents or some oil painting mediums in there as you go. So we can treat it. I'm going to start sketching and we can treat this kind of like we would any sketching material, a pastel, hard pastel, charcoal stick. So the color I'm going to choose first here is one of my favorites. It is charcoal blue. And I'm just wiping off a little bit of the grime from the last time I was using them. And they're very soft and buttery, a lot like lipstick. So I can draw really lightly and get these great sketched marks. And I'm here in the Bay Area, so I've been near the coast, so I'm going to be looking at some hills across the bay. And sketch in my lines. And then we'll have maybe a little bit of bay here. Maybe a bush, another bush. Let's see. And that can change. So with the sketched line, a lot of people want to treat these like a soft pastel when you're first using them. So you might put down some color and then expect to smudge it, but you see it doesn't smudge to the same extent as a soft pastel. It's a little bit more waxy, little oilier. So you're gonna get frustrated really quick if you're trying to smudge a lot with your fingers. So I actually don't smudge with my fingers very much at all while I'm painting with these. I will move right on to one of my favorite greens here, which is actually a cinnabar yellow brown. And I am going to just push in a whole bunch of this color, relatively thick. Let's see if I can get the camera a little closer to you there. And I push with a little bit of extra pressure. And that way I can get these thicker marks. Because if I get it, actually that works for me. Let me take it out of the wrapper, put it on its side. If I get a lot of that color down initially, then I have a base to work on. Now I mentioned that this is oily and waxy. These are a combination of wax, pigment, and oil. But it's a different combination of wax, pigment, and oil than some of the other products we create. It's got a mineral wax in it, as well as the same artist pigments that we would use in our other products. but the wax is a mineral wax as opposed to like a beeswax or anything else that's going to be drying. And that is for a really good reason. That mineral wax never dries. So you may know that oil pastels are never going to dry on the surface you're working on. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get to finish the project, the painting. But it has a great reason for not drying. The reason that it doesn't dry is because we want it to be archival on paper, as well as other surfaces. And if any of you out there are oil painters, you've probably heard don't oil paint on paper, at least without preparing it first. And that is because the oils in the paint will leach into the paper, and over time they'll eat away at it. They'll make it brittle. It'll become yellow. You get those halos around whatever you're painting. It'll stain the back because it's soaking in. So with the oil pastels, we had to overcome that to make it archival on any surface. And so they use a mineral wax, and that keeps it archival. It prevents it from soaking into the paper. But the trade-off is that it never dries. So I often get people saying, how am I going to use it if it never dries? But if you think about it, one of the reasons we call it a pastel is because of its shape, but also because of kind of the way we work with it. It's not like a soft pastel. It's not going to perform like a soft pastel, but with soft pastel, you have to frame under glass because it stays chalky forever. So in a lot of ways, this has a similarity there in that this is never going to be still. It's always going to be able to be moved. And with soft pastel, you come up against that same challenge. No matter what, it's going to be able to be moved. So we'll use a fixative, or we'll frame it under glass. And now I just wanted to get a couple of highlights back in there. So I'm scraping with my palette knife, and you can see I can get this really thick and pasty as I'm doing that, but I can also scrape back and see some of my drawing underneath. And then use my paper towel to wipe my palette knife off so I don't muddy everything in a little bit. And then we will pick another green. And one of the things I haven't done yet, because I just used these not too long ago, was I hadn't peeled the paper. So these are all perforated. They have micro perforations. What is that? Every quarter inch, half inch, or something like that. And so as we're using it, we can actually peel those perforations and have a clean area of pastel underneath without having to fiddle too much. And that keeps it so that we can continue holding it by the wrapper. With this, I'm going to blend in a little bit of extra color down here. And I think these are just fantastic, whether I'm working in the studio or if I'm working in plein air. Now, again, because they don't dry, there's a little bit of other stuff to overcome in plein air, just like with any pastel. So if I'm working on site, or if I'm taking them, traveling with them, I might take, a little glassine with me, or even some wax paper from the kitchen, just so I have a little something to cover it up with. Having a little bit of that color there. Which color is this? Use a phthalo green light. I'm going to peel a wrapper on there too real quick. And it's broken, but that's okay. Just used a little piece here. Blend it in. And some darks. Then I'm going to grab yet another green. This one's a little smushy, but I'm okay with that. It's really dark. Get down here in the foreground. And then after I cover a little bit of area, we'll talk about how to get a little bit more fine detail. But it's always nice to start a little looser. One of the things I really like about the oil pastels, it forces me to be a little more loose. I don't get stuck in the details. And then we're going to add in a little bit more of this charcoal blue over here. I'll leave a little gap I could fill in later. And we're going to grab some Delft blue. Now I'll get a nice light blue in there. Right. So now I have kind of the basis for my drawing, my painting. And so I'm going to kind of analyze it and think about where my light source is going to come from. So in this case, I scraped out some highlights on the right-hand side of the hill over here. So I'm going to make my light source come from over here, which means that I want to keep that area light, keep that area light. Maybe a little bit here, because this is going to cast a shadow. A little bit of light right here. And we'll leave this all shadow because we're looking at the back side of it. So then I'm going to take my Naples yellow. I'm going to add in some of those light sources so I don't forget about them. I can always go back in, scrape, add in, take out. If it's starting to get a little too gummy, we'll see right here. I actually, in my normal painting, I would leave this. I kind of like that. But just for the sake of us talking today, let's say that's getting a little too muddy with the color underneath it. Then I'll take my palette knife and I'll scrape it back down so you can see it's almost bare paper, just a little stain. So I have the extra gunk there. And I will wipe that off. And then if I clean off the tip of my oil pastel there, then I have a nice clean surface to work on again. Have my highlight down in here. Okay with that, because we're going to bring the blue back in. Some highlight over here. And then I want to think about my shadows. So I'm going to let's grab a burnt sienna here. And this hill, it's going to cast a shadow here. And this hill. I'm going to apply a lot of pressure. I'm going to get a lot of the stick down here. And then we'll grab that dark green again. We'll add that back in here real quick. Wipe my fingers off. So that highlight stays there because it had that Naples yellow, but I'm bringing in the green that I have underneath it. Keep it all uniform. Now, I don't always, as I mentioned, this is for a series of abstracted landscapes I've been doing. So I don't have to keep it too realistic. I'm going to draw in a little line. Delineate some of my foreground, my midground, and my background. Of course, in real life, there are no lines, but as I'm going, it'll help me see it a little clearer. And then here in the foreground, I can add in a little bit of, what do we got? Raw sienna. Now the paper I'm working on, I can talk a little bit about too, because these will work on anything, literally anything. I could be using this on drawing paper. I could be using it on mixed media paper. I could be using it on canvas or linen, but I'm using it on Fabriano Artistico watercolor paper, and some Fabriano Studio watercolor paper is off to the side here. I'll use that in a little bit. So with the Fabriano paper, I really like it. It is a really fantastic company that's been around for a good long while. They were started in 1264 in Fabriano, Italy. So it's 759 years this year they've been making paper. So they have quite a bit of practice. And this, the Artistico, is kind of the culmination of that. It's a 100% cotton watercolor paper, and it's 140 pounds. It just takes a lot of abuse. Really good stuff. The studio paper that we'll be playing with a little bit is a 25% cotton. So it is a phenomenal paper as well. It's just a little less expensive because it doesn't have that 100% cotton. But Fabriano is kind of the establisher of a lot of the things we take for granted in paper today, like surface sizing and watermarks, mass production. But they still do a lot of it by hand. There's a lot of human involvement. So I'm still just playing a little bit, trying to get my bearings. As I'm looking at it down in front of me, I see a lot of things that I like, and then I look at the screen, and this is kind of a nice little exercise because the screen looks much different than what I feel like I'm seeing in front of me. So I am gonna use that as my guide. I'm adding in some more yellow. I'm gonna warm it up a little bit. This is a darker yellow. This is the yellow deep. Then I'm gonna go back in with some more of that green, different green actually, but I'm gonna tie in some green here. Just want to do a little cross hatching. Then we're going to add in a little bit of this gray green into this water down here because it's a little too bright for my taste. Standing out a bit, especially with all these shadows that we're seeing cast. We don't want the water to be too much. We can always bring a little bit more of that blue, like this Delft blue, bring that back into it. And I change the direction of my mark making as I go, just to add a little bit of variance, makes it feel a little more natural. If I was doing it all in the same direction or not following the contours, it would look a little bit too printed. I don't know, too like a 3D print has all the same directional marks. I'm gonna grab some white. We haven't used any white yet. A little bit. Add it into those highlights a bit. All right, I can keep going for quite a while, but I'm sure we want to talk about a few other things in a minute, so try not to fiddle for too long, maybe a little longer. Got some of this chrome brown, some of that in my foreground. Some green looks a little garish to me. Soften it up. Bring that same color down here. And I want to go back in with that charcoal blue that started everything. Add in some shadow down here. Shadow down here. I'm going to tie everything back together a little bit. We get a little shadow on the hillsides here. I don't feel like it has enough pinks in it yet, so I'll find some ways to fit some pinks in there. So a lot of people get frustrated with oil pastels as they're first trying them out because they're not as easy to plan around as some soft pastels. You know, it leaves a little it leaves a residue behind. So you have to kind of plan on that residue as you're working on it, and the other layers will kind of incorporate themselves. But I find when I work this way, very thick, that it's a lot more like painting. And I don't worry too much about smudging things with my fingers. I don't get as frustrated from it. If I was trying to keep it very thin on the surface, then I would find it very challenging. But I really like the ability to get these great textures and let the paint kind of incorporate the layers underneath. And then if I wanted something more of a watercolor effect, I could, of course, it's a great mixed media material. I could work with watercolor on this paper first, or inks, or acrylics, anything I want. And then I could simply use the oil pastel over those to get these effects over a painting that's already started. It can always be used on top of other media. It can't always be used underneath other media. So just be cautious of that. You don't want to have this painting going and then go to work with an acrylic over the top of it. It won't be happy. Playing with my sky a little bit. So I'm gonna get that light blue back out. That's okay. So one of the things I want to do with my sky, after I get a good amount of pigment down, it's kind of the same thing I did with those hills in the beginning. I want to scrape and burnish, get a little bit of that color intermingling with the palette knife. Paper towel here. Okay, turn it on its side just because that's a little easier for the direction I'm going. And I just want to use the edge of the palette knife, the blade side down, and I'm just going to scrape. Then I'm going to reapply it. Scrape again. So that kind of gives me a little bit of a wash effect there that I'm pretty happy with. Put some of that paste back down. Little sky marks. Clean that off. That's the direction I like. I'm going to look for the next color I want to experiment with, which is going to be this Venetian red. I want to draw a line of this Venetian red, which is kind of a brown or rusty red. Just going to outline that. And then I'm going to go back in with my white and outline. Go right over that Venetian red. A little bit of that dirty white down in here. Bring in some of that Venetian red I got on there. I'm going to take that yellow back out. Add a little more of that. So there's a few things on here I would change if I had a little more time. I would scrape it, but actually we'll try it. We'll try it. So I feel like this shape right here is not making me happy. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape all that. Scrape a little bit of that. I'm going to go back in. Let's make this a little bit more earth instead of water. I'm using a brighter green than I need to, but that's just to get my base down, see if the shape works for me. And then I'll go back in with that brown. We used yet another brown I don't think we've used yet, and that is umber. So very dark brown. A little bit more of a silhouette than anything. We're going to use a little bit of this raw sienna. Start to tie that back together. And we'll go back in and get some of that charcoal blue that I like. Add that in, get a little uniform shadow down here. Then take this white again. Get a little bit lighter. That makes me a little happier. And I'll bring that pink. That, what color is it actually called? Light English red. And we're gonna sketch in this line. Keep it pretty simple. Get some layers in there. All right, that makes me a little happier. I like that composition a little better because this tucks itself back there and doesn't go from edge to edge. Use this violet ochre. All right, now one question that's going to come up after you've finished working on your painting is, all right, it looks fun, it's very thick, but what do I do now? How do I get this back home, or how do I get it framed, or how do I get it to the framer without it being smudged all over the place and ruined? And that's a very good question. Now, if we're using professional framers, then they're familiar with a lot of mediums and they'll already know how to perform around them, how to respond to them. But if we don't tell them, or if we're using another kind of framer or trying to frame it ourselves, we want to know these things. So I got my hands nice and dirty. I use the Sennelier Oil Pastel Fixatif, and it will work on any medium. It doesn't have to be oil pastels. It's a vinyl-based resin that works over the surface of the oil pastels really well. Now, I've heard people before say that it will dry oil pastels or it will harden oil pastels, and that is not the case. So I'll give a few tips here. The first is that you shake it really well. And when you think you've shaken it enough, keep shaking it. Anytime you're using anything in a spray can, you want to make sure that it's shaken really, really well. If you want to set a timer, set an egg timer for 2 minutes. That's usually more than adequate, but you do want it to be really well and mixed. And then you want to use it about a foot to 18 inches away from the surface and give it a really light misting. You can give it a number of really light mistings, but don't apply it so it's wet. You don't want it to look like there's a big puddle of stuff on your painting. And then even once that's done, if you were to take your fingernail or your palette knife and scrape at it, it would still damage your painting. Just like with a soft pastel, if you spray it with a fixative and then you go and you really scrub at it, it's still going to move. This is the same. So I equate this fixative to being like a saran wrap over a birthday cake. It's going to protect the frosting from things like dust and dirt and cat hair. But if somebody really wants to do damage to that cake, they're still going to be able to poke it through the saran wrap. So think of it that way and know that it's just a protective layer to help to prevent this sticky surface from really grabbing anything. And it will become a little less sticky over time. It'll set up. But if you come back to it 10 years and you want to retouch it, you still can. So it's still very mobile, very movable. So I will often, if I'm working on the surface with oil pastel and I know it's finished, I'm never going to want to touch it again. I'll use the fixative for a few layers, and then I'll add a spray varnish, an archival spray varnish over the surface of that. That gives it a little bit more durability. Or if I'm working in mixed media, I'll use this over the surface of the whole painting, and then I'll do the same thing. I'll varnish over it. But this is definitely an important step if you don't want cat hair or dust or pollen or things like that to be able to land on the surface of the painting and stay there forever. Because I do have a few paintings that look a little fuzzy over the years. So that is my suggestion for finishing. And then, of course, if you don't like that, you don't like the idea of spraying that on there, then definitely frame it under glass, just like has always been the traditional method for soft pastels. You know, you put it under glass and then you never have to worry about it again. The oil pastel is the exact same. And then now that I've gotten this layer down, I wanted to talk about the fixative because I'm not going to be able to spray it. I'm inside right now. We want to have adequate ventilation when we do that. But now I'm going to take my color shaper and I just want to draw back in. So one area that I neglected a little bit was this midground. And you know, here in California, we have a lot of farmland. And since I'm not working from life, let's imagine this as a little bit more of a farm area. So I'm gonna give it some sharper one. I'm gonna give it some streaks, just like we have in fields. And I like this because it digs in a little bit, but it doesn't change the colors dramatically. It smudges them a little bit. So the overall look that I'm looking for is going to stay the same. Now, all these tools, these color shapers, things like this, they come in a variety: soft, hard, different textures, or different shapes, I should say. So see what's going to work for you. I tend to use a little bit of both. These are the softer ones. The harder ones will scrape in a little harder for me. And then if I want to give highlighted areas, I can. This is just going to blend things a little nicely. If I want to blend an area, I can go in and blend it. Let's see if I can show you a little blending. So like here, if I wanted these colors to be merged a little bit more like paint, I can go ahead and do that.
That's so satisfying to look at. Andrew, you answered a bunch of questions about the fixative and framing.
Yep.
But Wendy had a question about the effect of oil pastel on acrylic painted on a canvas. Could you comment on that?
I can. So Oil pastel will work over the surface of virtually anything archivally. So if you're working in acrylic, anytime you're doing anything to acrylic, whether it's varnishing it or painting over it with something, you want to give it plenty of curing time. We don't often think about that with our acrylic paintings, but on average, I recommend giving 3 days. So if you finished an acrylic painting and you want to draw on it with oil pastels, or you want to varnish it, give your acrylic painting at least 3 days of rest, and that'll make sure that that acrylic polymer is really set up. And then from there, you can do something like this. If you wanted to draw right on the surface of your acrylic painting, in fact, hang on one moment. Let's see what I can find over here. So if I have my acrylic painting, like this one here in front of me, then this has had over a week to set up on me. So it's nice and hard, even though it's thick. And I could take my oil pastels. Actually, let's go with my Delft. No, sorry. Let's go with my violet ochre. So I could then go in with my oil pastels and draw right on the surface of that acrylic paint. And the acrylic paint is not going to have any negative impact from this. The oil pastel still won't dry, all those things we talked about. So when I'm finished, I'm going to want to still spray it with that fixative. And then from there, I may want to varnish the entire thing. So you can treat it a lot like the oil pastel on its own when you're all finished up. And then if you wanted to go back in and work with acrylic, that I would not suggest. So once the oil pastel is on here, that is kind of the finishing touch. But all the other aspects of it, we can still do. I can still scrape. Apply. Keep painting into it with the oil pastel. And this goes not just for acrylic, but for anything, for watercolor, for oil painting. So I hope that answered the question. But it's completely compatible. Very happy together. Now I'm just going to keep scribbling on this one a little bit. And I do work with my acrylic as well on canvas or on Fabriano paper. I'll use it on the same studio and the Artistico that we were talking about. And I can treat it all the same, whether I want to varnish it, fix it, frame it under glass. So that's a little bit of oil pastel on acrylic paint. You can see, let's see, they're going to have a different sheen. So different look. So when I go to fix it and varnish it, that'll help tie those together as well. Tie together that matte satin sheen of the oil pastel and the slightly more glossy satin sheen of the acrylic.
That was a really good explanation. We have more questions here.
Sure.
And yes, can you
Here.
comment on the difference with oil pastel and oil sticks?
I certainly can. So oil sticks are an oil paint that is in a stick form. So it has a drying oil in it, like linseed oil or safflower oil, and that is going to make them dry on the surface. And because of that, we want to use those just like an oil paint on any surface that is suitable for oil painting. So it has to be primed. You can't use the oil sticks directly on paper. They'll still do that thing we talked about where they'll soak into the paper. So the oil sticks we can use on primed canvas or primed paper, gesso paper, but not directly. Where the oil pastel has that mineral wax in it instead of the drying oil. It's got a mineral oil, mineral wax, and it's going to prevent it from drying permanently, but it'll work on any surface. So they have a lot of similarities, except the drying is the biggest difference. And that drying also means the surfaces that they can be used on are quite varying. So oil pastels can be used on anything, oil sticks only on surfaces suitable for oil painting.
And following that thought, to increase transparency with oil pastels, can we use oil paint mediums?
You absolutely can. You can do washes with solvents. You can add oil painting mediums. The only thing to keep in mind there is that as soon as you're adding an oil painting medium, then it's becoming an oil paint. So if you're using something like linseed oil or Galkid or Liquin, then as soon as you use those, you can only work on surfaces suitable for oil painting, because all of those things contain the things that we don't want to soak into the paper. Now, the one exception to that is if I wanted to do washes, I could use, my mineral spirits to do a wash, and that evaporates fast enough and doesn't have oil in it that I could use the mineral spirits to do washes on paper, as long as I'm not using them too heavily. And of course, the type of mineral spirits and what's in there is going to play a part. So one thing I recommend, especially when we're talking generally about a lot of different mediums, is to always do a test. Have a scrap piece of paper, kind of like I had that acrylic painting off to the side. Have a scrap piece of paper you can just test things on before you're going to do it on your finished artwork. And that way you can see what's going to happen. You can flip it over and see if anything's going to bleed through the back of your paper. And as soon as it does, oh, I should only use that on a surface suitable for oil painting. Did we have any other questions that I could answer while we're in our final minutes?
Yes. So Numa asked, when layering, the chat went crazy. When layering with oil pastel, is the paper or the quality of pastel that helps with the layering?
Both. So if I was working on a really smooth surface like plastic, plexiglass, Yupo, anything like that, then the layering is going to be a little bit more limited than if I'm working on a textural surface. But it has a lot to do as well with the oil pastels themselves. For those of you who have not yet used Sennelier Oil Pastels, but you've used other oil pastels, I'm sure you've had the experience where you get that effect kind of like crayons, where the wax can build up. And once that happens, you don't want to layer anymore, or it becomes difficult to layer. With the Sennelier Oil Pastels, because of how soft and oily they are, let me grab a good color to show you exactly how soft they are. So we can see my hand here. We'll do it on the side. We can see the best maybe. So Sennelier Oil Pastels, I keep referencing lipstick, and that is exactly what it's like. It will go down like butter on anything. So if you imagine the oil pastels that you've used that aren't Sennelier, or the oil pastels you get as a kid, if I were to try and do that, I probably wouldn't have any mark on my hand at all. It's much more wax content in there, and this is much more oil content.
So another question, do these pastels smell like oil paints, or are they considered low odor?
They smell not like oil paint, more like just a little waxy, maybe like an unscented candle scent. but it's not beeswax or anything, just kind of a benign scent. They are low odor. They don't have any mineral spirits or anything in there. And they all have, let's see if I can get it to the camera well enough for you all to see. Let's see if my camera will refocus for me.
Probably too close to the camera.
Maybe. You gotta move the right thing, make it focus. We'll try another color and see. And then if that doesn't work, I'll just explain it. There we go. So you see that little AP symbol on there? That is the ACMI certification that it's non-toxic. If it has cadmium or cobalt or any kind of mineral spirits in it, or any kind of chemical, it would have a CL, which means caution label. And so as long as it has that AP on there, there's not going to be any of that smelly stuff. A good example, actually, if we look at the fixative, which of course needs to be used outside, you want to have adequate ventilation, then there's all these warnings on there. And then at the bottom, we see the CL for caution labeling. And that's just telling you all the things about you want to have adequate ventilation, don't breathe it, don't use it if you're pregnant, all those things that we would expect to see on a can of aerosol.
We have another question about the erasing shield.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I completely forgot it was sitting here next to me. It is just another tool that I really love to utilize with my oil pastels, because it acts as a nice little stencil. So I mentioned earlier that I would tell everyone how I get some of the detail. And an erasing shield is just a really good way to do that. So let's say I wanted along my foreground here to have a picket fence, and I could use my erasing shield as a stencil to get some of those sharper lines that would be a little bit more difficult. And then I'll just trace really lightly to kind of show wire. But the erasing shield is really great, whether I'm doing something that's representational or something that's more abstract. You know, we can utilize any of these shapes here to really grab. Let's grab a darker color. Grab some, you know, if I wanted to show some rain droplets or something, then I could go back in and do my polka dots. Or if I needed a good curve, really specific to a certain building, then I could go in and utilize these erasing shield curves. And from there, I would have my nice start. So that is the whole purpose of the erasing shield. It's just an additional tool that I like to use, that I saw other artists on YouTube using, and I thought it was very ingenious. So I like to share that idea that they gave me.
Brenda asked if the paintings you did today would be considered abstract.
You know, that's a question I've gotten recently more and more, and I really like that question. I would consider these abstract. They represent things that I've seen, certainly. But if I was comparing them, then this would be a change in what I'm seeing. So it's abstracted imagery of something. Whereas a lot of people associate abstract with something that is showing just color and form and doesn't represent anything we're seeing. That I would consider non-representational abstraction. This is representational abstraction. So I would say that this is things that exist that I am then simplifying.
Everyone's very grateful for all the information you said
Yeah.
today. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question
or-
myself.
Oh, there
Hello?
you go.
Yeah, so you alluded to alkyd then, and I wondered, because I'm a novice to this area, checking late. Those are the two basic types of pastel instruments then, or media, the one you're using, Sennelier, and the oil pastel you mentioned previously.
So yeah, these are all the Sennelier oil pastels. The alkyds were that's just an oil painting medium that speeds up the drying of oils. And that's just one of those oil painting mediums that can be used with oil pastels. But again, that would be something that you'd want to test and make sure it's going to work for the way you're doing it.
So there's just the two types. There's your Sennelier, and then there's the other oil pastel when it comes to pastel tools or instruments or media.
Yep, there's quite a number of brands of oil pastels.
Brands, I see.
They're all a little different. Yeah, so the Sennelier, it tends to be the softer of the gamut, the more buttery, the more painterly, less like a crayon than some of the other ones out there. But they all have different purposes, different histories that made them into what they are. Some are a little firmer, some are a little softer.
And you could always place this over gouache once it's dry.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
What, if I may, what is the major difference like when you're looking at color and you're putting the color on that people notice about your work vis-a-vis, let's say, acrylic? I'm an acrylic artist, so I'm going to get certain effects with acrylic artists. I'm just wondering what the advantage would be with the Sennelier, for example, when you compare the two.
Sennelier makes oil pastels. They also make acrylic. So the color range is going to be very similar between the two.
Right.
It's mostly the effects that you're going for that are going to be the big variants.
The effects.
Yep, the effects. And then as far as Sennelier's color palette overall, whether we're looking at oil pastels or oil paint or acrylic or anything at all, their color palette tends to be more French Impressionist inspired because they came about at the time of the French Impressionists in the 1880s. So we see a lot of very bright, bold colors that the French Impressionists would have been asking for at the time, that Sennelier has made a part of their repertoire.
So it would make the brush strokes look different, like with the acrylic versus what you're doing. And I see.
Yep.
The edges and what have you, the textures.
Yep.
So I believe this is all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Andrew, for such a great demo. All the supplies, as I said on the chat, is listed on our events page. And you can also find Andrew's website and Instagram if you want to keep in touch and see his art. I have another question. Can you work the oil pastel with your fingers or instruments only?
You can absolutely use your fingers. They are, yeah, as long as they have that AP non-toxic rating, and you can see I've been getting them quite all over my hands this entire time too. I don't tend to like the look of the smudging with my fingers as much. Let's see if I can show real quick, sorry. So I can see all these textural marks that the stick gives me when I'm working with that or the marks from the tools. But as soon as I use my fingers, it does soften. And a lot of people who are working more representational will like to do that. But personally, I prefer the more gestural look than the softened look. So I like to show a lot of the different tools that can be used for that.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, yes. So again, on the events page, you'll see all the information for Andrew's links and the events. His Instagram account is Andrew P. Cook. Again, you can see it linked. He's going to be really easy. Please take advantage of our sale right now. It's very rare that we have a whole wide 20% off on everything. So it's definitely take advantage of that. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Andrew. I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.